Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the twilight of a ruined abbey, its sandstone walls glowing faintly under a cold violet sky. Your shoes crunch over pebbles and a few startled crows flap out of a roofless cloister. The air smells of wet moss and ash, and somewhere in the shadows an owl gives a polite cough, as if to say you're late. You probably won't survive this in a video game sense. Low hit points, no torch, medieval ruins full of drafty ghosts. But here you're safe, drifting along in a story designed to lull you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time. I love seeing our sleepy map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pause before a doorway arched like a cat's back. Frescoes once brilliant are now gray freckles on stone, yet a low, modern buzz fills the space. Archaeologists' LED lamps and a click of cameras. Just last summer, a team announced they had identified the long-rumored second library of St. Duthac Abbey here. For centuries, monks had whispered about a locked chamber beneath the refectory, sealed during a siege in the 1300s. No record survived, only a cryptic line in charter. The wisdom of the West Wing shall sleep in darkness. People assumed it meant lost books burned or plundered, but ground-penetrating radar, like a polite X-ray of the earth, showed a rectangular void behind a fallen stair. 2 weeks of careful scraping later, a hidden vault opened like a yawn. Inside, the shelves had collapsed, but fragments of more than 400 manuscripts lay in layered heaps, parchment curling like pastry at the edges. One mainstream fact everyone agrees on: the Abbey was a powerhouse of early herbal medicine. Its main scriptorium copied Arabic medical texts into Latin for European healers. Among the new finds were pages describing surgical techniques previously dated 2 centuries later. You run a finger just above the air where a diagram of a cataract needle floats, ink faded to cinnamon. Even in this hush retelling, you can feel the thrill, half museum, half crime scene. And then the quirky bit. Wedged between treatises on leeching and wound powders was a recipe for dragon scale syrup, complete with an illustration of what looked suspiciously like a lizard tail dipped in honey. Was it code for an exotic plant, a medieval inside joke, or genuinely some poor reptile's fate? Historians still argue whether monks here sincerely believed in mythical ingredients or simply marketed their remedies with flashy branding, medieval Instagram style. It's strangely comforting to know clickbait existed even when quills squeaked on vellum. You step deeper, brushing past a dangling root. The ceiling above has collapsed just enough to create a skylight, and through it a single beam of evening sun spills onto a carved lectern. There's a groove on the wood where hands once rested for centuries, a small human notch amid grand arches. In that moment, you imagine a young copyist, ink-stained fingers, smuggling a silly doodle into margin. A rabbit wearing a mitre perhaps, just to break the monotony. Modern labs now detect micro traces of lapis lazuli in some of the pigments here, meaning the stones traveled all the way from Afghanistan to Scotland or France. You let that distance roll in your head like a marble. Blue rock crossing deserts, ships, and war zones just a tin of monk's capital letter. And you thought your Amazon shipping was slow. As you move toward the apse, the cold thickens. The dig team left for the night, their tools stacked neatly. You pick up the soft echo of your own steps and imagine how the room once smelled of wax and damp wool cloaks. Outside the abbey walls, a modern village still holds a fair each autumn, selling oat cakes and plastic swords to tourists who never suspect the treasures beneath their feet. You lean against a pillar and close your eyes. The wind sneaks in like a cat, and for a second you could swear you hear whispering Latin prayers. Maybe that's your cue to slow your breathing, to match the rhythm of the monks you're picturing. This is how a boring story turns quietly hypnotic. One discovery, one small mystery solved, and yet still enough unsolved threads to keep you curious while your eyelids get heavy. Before you leave, you notice a tablet mounted by the door, an LCD screen showing a 3D scan of the chamber. The caption says Phase 2 excavation begins spring next year. Even in our supposedly enlightened age, mysteries wait politely for trowels and patience. You trace the edge of the doorway, wondering which part of your own life will be boxed up and rediscovered in 700 years. Your old phone charger? A coffee loyalty card? People then will argue over its purpose, just like we puzzle over dragon scale syrup. And as that thought drifts, the night air around the abbey seems to thicken into a blanket, cool but oddly comforting, ready to follow you into the next forgotten layer of medieval life. You step out from the abbey's cool shadow and find yourself in a bustling square. Except it's not the cheerful market of postcards, but the dark underlayer of a medieval city revealed by a recent dig. The cobblestones under your feet are real enough, but the crowd you see is a ghost of memory. Vendors shouting about salted fish, children darting between carts, a juggler tossing apples for pennies. You drift among them as if in a slow-motion dream, the chatter muffled, your breath warm in the early morning chill. Modern archaeologists stand just off to the side, wearing neon vests and sipping takeaway coffee, and the contrast feels like someone spliced two timelines together. This place was once a thriving market square. Everyone thought they knew its history. Taxes collected here, proclamations shouted from the steps of the town hall, the usual pageantry. But last winter, during a routine utility trench, workers struck bone, a single femur at first, then dozens. The mainstream fact now on every local news channel. Beneath the square lay a forgotten burial ground from the mid-1300s. Radiocarbon dating lined up neatly with the Black Death years, but the layout was nothing like other plague pits. Here the bodies were arranged carefully, heads east, small stones at their feet, as if marking individual plots. That detail leads to the quirky twist. Mixed in with a human, remains were tiny ceramic jars, sealed with wax. When conservators cracked the first one open, expecting ointment or perfume, they found dried rose petals mixed with crushed juniper berries. The scent still clung faintly to the shards, sweet, resinous, a time-traveling whiff of someone's attempt at kindness. Were mourners placing herbal charms with the dead? Or were the dead themselves once merchants of spices, interred with their wares? Historians still argue whether this was an emergency mass grave handled with respect or a ritualized burial for a guild struck down together. You crouch near an exposed jar and imagine a medieval hand tucking it in like a comfort toy. Your eye catches something glinting in the soil, a coin, not gold or silver but pewter, stamped with a crude fish and a sunburst. Local kids call them market tokens when they dig them up for fun, but chemical tests now show traces of copper and salt crystals on the edges. One theory is that vendors issued these as credit for future purchases. Another posits they were offerings tossed into a fountain that once stood here. And because no medieval scene is complete without a bit of sarcasm, you picture a fishmonger yelling, "No cash? Pay me in tokens." The medieval equivalent of reward points. As you stroll farther, the modern city above fades. Traffic noise becomes a distant hush like waves on sand. You find a section where cobblestones give way to packed earth, and faint chalk lines mark where archaeologists plan to open the next trench. They suspect a small chapel once stood at the edge of the square. Its foundation stones poke out like gray knuckles, and ground-penetrating radar hints at a crypt beneath. You think of the Abbey's hidden library from a few minutes ago and sense a pattern, secrets underfoot, patiently waiting. A cool breeze carries a scent of roasted chestnuts from a real vendor's cart up on the street. You smile at the overlap. 7 centuries apart and still the same smell. That's your second light joke. Some things never change, including overpriced snacks. Your stomach growls and you imagine trying to pay with a pewter fish token. The vendor just gives you a puzzled look. You tuck the imaginary coin back into the soil. Standing there, you feel the square's layers pressing down like pages of a very thick book. Above, tourists snap selfies with a fountain that isn't original. Below, skeletons rest with their herbal jars. Deeper still, maybe older foundations we haven't dreamed of yet. The city's own website now offers a Bones Beneath the Market walking tour, but no one really knows the full story. Was this square a marketplace built over a cemetery, or a cemetery built over a marketplace? The official pamphlet says, "Interpretation ongoing," a polite way of saying, "We're stumped." As dusk deepens, the archaeologists pack up their gear. One kneels, brushes a skull clean, and places a soft cloth over it before leaving, a small gesture of respect. You take a slow breath, feeling the coolness seep into your palms resting on the railing. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the medieval vendors again, their voices weaving with the whisper prayers for the dead. It's a strangely gentle chorus, lulling you the way a train's rhythm does. You lean into that sound, letting it soften the edges of the day. When you finally straighten, the square above has gone quiet too. Streetlights flicker on, casting golden puddles across the stones. Somewhere a bus hisses, somewhere a bell tolls. You step back from the trench, your mind carrying the scent of rose juniper from those jars and the feel of tokens gritty in your palm. You're ready to follow the trail further, into another corridor time where lost treasures wait to be explained, or at least dreamed about until sleep arrives. You leave the market's whispering bones behind and wander down a narrow stone corridor lit by torches that exist only in your mind. The air cools, the walls grow closer, and a sense of hush settles over you, as if the stones themselves are pressing a finger to their lips. Ahead lies a heavy oak door banded with iron, carved with faded crest of 3 crowns. You push gently and it swings open with a sigh, revealing a treasury chamber that's part museum, part mystery novel. This is where the vanished crown jewels of a minor but flamboyant medieval kingdom were supposed to have been kept, a story so muddled with legend that tour guides used to wink when they told it. The mainstream fact goes like this. During the Civil War in the late 14th century, rebels stormed the royal vault, seizing regalia, crowns, scepters, and an orb inlaid with sapphires the size of plums. Official chronicles say the loot was loaded onto wagons and never seen again. For centuries, the assumption was theft and smelting, jewels scattered into private collections. But in 2022, a ground survey team mapping a riverbank 2 miles from here discovered a collapsed ferry dock. Sonar scans showed a wagon's outline submerged in silt. Divers retrieved iron fittings, oak fragments, and, most electrifying, 2 sections of a gilt lattice matching the missing orb's description. You crouch beside a display case where those fragments now rest. They look dull in the soft light, but a faint glimmer of gold leaf still clings to the edges like stubborn glitter after a party. This is a straightforward evidence, yet the quirky tidbit is a handwritten note found wedged between the wagon's boards, preserved in mud. In hurried script it says, "Return at low tide, the saints will cover us." Was it a smuggler's reminder? A monk's prayer? Historians still argue whether the jewels were being stolen out of greed, hidden to protect them from looters, or secretly ransomed to fund an exile's return. You imagine the scene. Panicked courtiers loading wagons at night, horses stamping in the fog, someone scribbling that note with freezing fingers. And then disaster. The ferry overloaded. A rope snaps. The wagon tips into the dark river. Gold and velvet sinking in a swirl of silt. The mental image is almost cinematic, but here in this dim room you only hear a faint drip from the ceiling and your own slow heartbeat. A guide's voice echoes from a corridor, rehearsing the official script about ongoing conservation. You smirk at the thought that medievals may have invented the first limited edition drop of royal merch. Lose in the river. Let future generations hype it up. That's your light joke for this stretch. You wander over to a replica crown place for visitors to try on, but it's behind glass. Still, you can picture its weight, the cold press of metal on your temples, the symbolic migraine. Near the far wall stand a locked cabinet labeled Material Under Study. Through the mesh you glimpse items too fragile for display, a velvet pouch, a twisted chain, and what might be a sapphire button shaped like a tear. Conservators have used micro-CT scans to peek inside the pouch without opening it. Inside appears to be a folded parchment, possibly a receipt or a confession. Analysis ongoing. The placard says the academic way of winking. The chamber smells faintly of beeswax and damp stone. You reach out and trace the grooves of the doorframe, remembering the herbal jars from the market and the blue lapis of the Abbey Library. This story too fits into the larger pattern of hidden things resurfacing. Bones under squares, books under cloisters, jewels under mud. The continuity soothes you. Even lost glitter eventually drifts back into the light. You lean against a pillar, slowing your breathing. The faint hum of a dehumidifier becomes a medieval drone in your ears, like monks chanting from somewhere deep below. Your eyelids droop. The image of the wagon tipping into the river slows and fades, replaced by the steady heartbeat of dripping water in the chamber. It's oddly lulling, like a metronome counting down to sleep. You let your head tilt back. thinking how many other treasures still rest unseen, waiting for some future archaeologists with a sonar gun and a thermos of coffee. As you step back into the corridor, the door closes softly behind you. The crown story, half solved and half mystery, follows you like a lullaby of lost gold. Ahead another glow beckons, this time from a room of parchment and strange glowing inks, where secrets once written for candlelight only have just begun to reveal themselves under lasers and chemistry sets. The corridor narrows into a low-ceilinged hall lined with long wooden tables, each dusted with centuries of fine grit. You catch the sweet charred smell of old wax and something faintly metallic, like the tang of ink ground on a stone slab. The scriptorium feels like stepping inside a book's bloodstream. Candles once flickered here, but now a cluster of soft blue lights hovers over a workbench where conservators test tiny paint flakes. The glow makes the pigments on the walls seem alive, as if the colors have been waiting for a chance to breathe again. This is where the mainstream fact blooms. Chemical analyses in the last 5 years have revealed that some medieval inks and pigments were far more complex than assumed. Researchers found traces of bismuth arsenic, even crushed beetle shells mixed with walnut oil and soot. One recipe, hidden in a marginal note in a Benedictine manual, called for exposing ink to moonlight for 3 nights to bind its spirit. You run a fingertip just above a sheet where an invisible pattern now flares bright under UV, curling like vines. It feels as if someone wrote a secret just for you, waiting 7 centuries to glow. The quirky discovery here is a small scroll tucked into a false bottom of a manuscript box. On its surface, the letters look like normal Latin prayers, but under multispectral imaging, they rearranged into an acrostic spelling out Beatus Cuculus, Blessed Hood. Was it a joke about the monks' cowls? A sly advertisement for a rival scriptorium's robes? Or perhaps an encoded signature? Historians still argue whether such hidden messages were acts of rebellion or simply games of wit to break the monotony of copying. You imagine a bored scribe giggling to himself, dipping his quill while superior lectures about humility. A conservator points out a palette ground from lapis lazuli, like the shards you saw at the Abbey. This one, though, contains flecks of powdered glass. Tests suggest the glass improved how the pigment caught candlelight, making illuminated initials literally shimmer in the dark. That's your little light joke here. Medievals basically invented glitter pens centuries before stationery shops. You picture a monk bragging, "Mine sparkles more than yours in the quietest whisper." You wander farther down the hall, past shelves where books lie open in cradles. Some pages look plain until a filter snaps over a camera lens, revealing diagrams of constellations or trade routes previously unknown. In one corner stands a giant wheel with pegs, a book carousel that allowed scribes to consult multiple texts at once. The design predates known examples by decades. You gently spin it, though it creaks like an old swing. It's a small, friendly sound in the hush. The scriptorium ceiling arches above you like a rib cage, and light from the modern lab lamps glints off bits of gold leaf trapped in cracks. You slow your breathing to match the hum of the machines. The idea that so much knowledge lay invisible until someone tried a new wavelength feels oddly hopeful, like there are still glow-in-the-dark surprises inside you too. At one table sits a sheet of parchment half covered in faded ink. Next to it, a printout shows the same page under a laser. Hidden there, a drawing of a tiny ship. Its sail bears a cross unfamiliar to European heraldry. The lab note reads, "Source uncertain." Some think it represents a mythical voyage. Others a real trade contact erased from official history. Historians still argue whether these marginal doodles are fantasy or eyewitness hints of worlds beyond the map. You let your gaze drift over the ship until the lines blur, a paper sea rocking you gently. Somewhere in the background a timer beeps, and a student scribbles notes. The sound merges with your pulse, a slow tick-tock under the higher hum of fluorescent lights. You imagine the monks centuries ago, dipping quills at the same tempo, candle flames fluttering. In that rhythm your mind begins to soften. You can almost hear the quiet scratch of pen on parchment, a lullaby of ink. On a nearby stand rests a sealed glass vial filled with recreated moonlight ink, following the old recipe. Under normal light, it's gray. Under UV, it glows sea green. You lean close, and the glow reflects in your eyes. It's a simple trick of chemistry, but feels like magic anyway. A staff member jokes, Harry Potter pigment. And you smile, third gentle joke in as many minutes. Even here, in a room of serious scholarship, whimsy sneaks in. You move toward the exit arch, passing a mural of saints painted in pigments now mapped element by element. Their halos flicker faintly as you go by, a visual echo. Beyond the arch you glimpse a stairwell spiraling down, the stone worn smooth by countless feet. The air drifting up smells of salt and pine. Down there waits another mystery. Something about a monk's diary and code, a cipher cracked only last winter. You adjust your pace, letting the memory of glowing ink settle into you like soft phosphorescence. Your eyelids feel heavier, your steps slower, as you follow the spiral deeper into the night of the past. The spiral stair curls you downward like a loose scroll, each step echoing with a faint hollow tone. The air grows cooler, tinged with salt and the paper dust smell of very old ink. At the bottom you find a narrow cell, part archive, part vault, lit by a single warm bulb and the blue shimmer of a computer screen. On a lectern lies a codex the size of a pizza box, bound in cracked leather. Its pages are a maze of cramped symbols, loops, and odd punctuation, as if someone had tried to write Latin with a hiccup. This is the monk's coded diary that scholars whispered about for decades, cracked only last winter. The mainstream fact: a real Cistercian brother kept this diary between 1298 and 1312, recording not just the abbey's accounts, but his own observations of stars, herbs, and local politics. For centuries, people assumed it was a boring ledger. Only when a data scientist fed it into an AI cipher solver did a pattern emerge. Under the symbols lay perfectly sensible Middle Latin, but with swapped vowels and disguised consonants. A simple key once guessed at by 19th century antiquarians, but never confirmed. When the team applied the algorithm, whole paragraphs bloomed into clarity, and what they revealed was, frankly, gossip. The monk wrote about a visiting bishop with a nose redder than St. Nicholas, about a rival scribe who borrows ink but never returns it, and about mysterious comets seen over the Western Sea. Mixed among these were careful diagrams of herbal distillations that predate known recipes by decades. One entry describes heating wine in a sealed copper vessel to collect its heavenly breath, arguably an early step toward brandy. You picture him sneaking sips, then recording the process under cipher so the abbot wouldn't know. That's your gentle joke. The first secret cocktail blog, medieval edition. The quirky discovery came halfway through the decrypted text, a small draw in what looks like a four-rotor windmill, centuries ahead of any known design. Some think it's a doodle, others a serious experiment. Historians still argue whether this was a fantasy sketch, an imported idea from travelers, or evidence of lost engineering. The image sits on the page like a dare to every textbook. You run your finger just above the parchment, feeling the grooves where quill pressure dented the skin. The monk wrote in a second-person voice too, addressing you, future reader, in several places. One line reads, "If you have eyes to see, you will know my truth." It's oddly intimate, like he's leaning over your shoulder 700 years later. You glance at the glowing computer screen, which displays a color-corrected scan. In the margins, modern notes flash, cross-check lunar observation, possible code switch to Occident. The past and present overlap, like two transparencies. Nearby sits a small wooden chest filled with other undeciphered scraps. A graduate student jokes about launching a Netflix for lost codes. You smile, second light joke, imagining a binge-watch series where each episode cracks a new cipher between tea breaks. Even in this quiet cell, the humor feels soft, like the murmur of a library cat. You lean against the cool stone wall and let your gaze wander to a window slit. Through it you see the tide creeping in over dark rocks, silver in the moonlight. It's easy to picture the monk gazing out the same slit, hearing gulls, tasting salt on the wind. Maybe he dreamed of sailing away with his coded notebooks to some warmer shore. Or maybe he was perfectly content, hiding his experiments in plain sight. On a side table rests a printout of one particularly startling entry, a description of black seeds from the east used to ward off plague. It matches a spice we now know as nigella, whose properties were mostly forgotten in Europe until centuries later. Another entry hints at contact with traders who speak through hand motions more than tongue. Historians still argue whether this implies early sign language merchants, secret societies, or just a language barrier. Each possibility opens a new door. The hum of the computer blends with your breathing. The page's strange loops blur until they look like waves on a calm sea. You feel your own thoughts slowing, like oars dipping. The monk's voice, sarcastic, curious, hidden, threads through the quiet, and you realize you're part as audience just as he hoped. That thought warms you, even as a draft sneaks across the floor. You step back from the lectern. The diary remains open, symbols glinting faintly, secrets still embedded like fossils. Beyond another arch you glimpse a misty shoreline where a ghost ship waits, a story sonar recently confirmed. The glow from the screen fades behind you as you move toward that next chapter, your steps soft, your mind heavy with sleepy curiosity. The arch opens onto a gust of salt-cold air, and suddenly you're standing at the edge of a fjord, so still it looks like poured pewter. Mist drapes the water in slow, lazy ribbons. A gull wheels once, then vanishes into gray. Beneath your boots the rock is slick with moss, and somewhere far below you can hear the muffled thud of waves against a hidden hull. You pull your cloak, or more realistically your imagination, tight and walk along the shore where legends always claimed a medieval ghost ship went down. For centuries the story was dismissed as folklore, a great trading vessel fleeing a storm or a raid, swallowed by the fjord without a trace. Local kids told each other it still sailed on the moon, crewed by glowing skeletons handing out cursed cod. That's the kind of bedtime rumor that makes you roll your eyes but secretly listen harder. The mainstream fact that jolted everyone awake came 2 summers ago when a marine archaeology team mapped this inlet with high-resolution sonar. There, 60 meters down, lay the clean outline of a clinker-built hull about 35 meters long, far larger than any known medieval ship in this region. The team's press release didn't call it a ghost ship, but you could hear the glee between the lines. You crouch near the water's edge. The mist smells of kelp and iron. On a laptop balanced on a rock, a researcher scrolls through the sonar image. Curved ribs, mast step intact. Even a faint scatter of barrels. One barrel retrieved under strict conditions contained pine tar and what might be dried lingonberries. That's the quirky bit. Historians expected salted fish or grain, not fruit preserves. Was the crew provisioning for a noble passenger? Was it a diplomatic gift? Or just sailors with a sweet tooth? Historians still argue whether the cargo points to a royal voyage, an early form of luxury trade, or something more clandestine. A diver surfaces near a marker buoy, mask dripping, and holds up a small brass disc etched with runes. You watch water stream from it like silver threads. Initial translation hints add a prayer for safe passage mixed with a merchant's mark. It's like finding someone's business card at the bottom of the sea. The diver cracks a joke about medieval loyalty points. Your gentle laugh blends with the surf. Third light joke of the stretch. You stroll farther along the rocks. The fjord narrows here, hemmed in by black cliffs streaked with quartz. You imagine the ship trying to beat the tide. Sails straining, a lookout shouting in the fog. One theory says it hit a submerged rock and capsized. Another that it was deliberately scuttled to hide contraband. Yet another more romantic version claims the crew abandoned it during a sudden vision of a saint on the cliffs. The sonar shows no obvious breach, just a hull lying on its side like a sleeping whale. Even the rudder remains. Analysis ongoing. The placard in the temporary visitor center says, "You kneel and touch the cold water." It's oddly calming, like touching history's pulse. The divers plan to raise only small pieces at first, leaving the hull intact to preserve it. You think back to the monk's coded diary and the wagon of jewels, and sense the same pattern. Hidden things waiting under layers, silt, ink, stone, until technology catches up. It's almost comforting, like secrets will always find a way to be told eventually. A breeze pushes mist across your face, cool and damp. You close your eyes and picture the ghost ship sailing by, sails translucent, crew humming an old work song. The rhythm matches your breathing, a slow in-out, like a lullaby from the deep. For a moment you sway as if on deck. The rock under your feet turn to planks. The mist of rigging. Then a gull calls, sharp and real, snapping you back but gently. Down the shore, a small wooden shack houses a project of artifacts. The brass disc, a section of tarred rope, and a carved wooden spoon whose handle ends in a tiny heart. Quirky, humble, human. A volunteer tells you they'll 3D print the hull for public display. The first medieval shipwreck you can hold in your hands. You smile at the thought. Another joke surfaces in your mind. Medieval IKEA, ship in 5,000 pieces. As the mist thickens, you begin to walk inland. The path leads up toward a bell tower you glimpsed earlier, its silhouette stark against the pale sky. Somewhere in that tower, behind gears and dust, waits another anachronism, an early mechanism that could change what we know about clocks. You follow the faint clang of a modern ladder being set up, your footsteps slow and steady, the image of the sleeping ship rocking you toward drowsiness. You climb the slope from the misty fjord, shoes slipping a little on damp grass, until the bell tower looms above you like a giant metronome. Its stone is streaked with lichens the color of old brass. A single rope dangles from the belfry, swaying lazily, though no breeze seems to move it. The air up here tastes like iron and rain, and each step you take echoes strangely, as if the tower is rehearsing your arrival. Inside, a spiral of wooden stairs hugs the wall, worn smooth by centuries of boots. You trail your hand along the cool stone and feel a faint vibration, not from bells but from something deeper, a heartbeat of gears. This is where a mainstream historical fact recently shifted. The tower's interior houses a mechanism at least 40 years older than any documented clockwork in this region. Until now, textbooks claimed large public clocks arrived here in the early 1400s. Yet dendrochronology of the beams supporting this device dates them to the late 1300s. The fine force of footnote rewrite in several survey books almost overnight. You reach the landing where beams and iron rods form a skeletal cube. Dust floats in shafts of light from arrow-slit windows. The mechanism is surprisingly graceful. A horizontal drum with wooden pegs, chains hanging like frozen vines, and a stone weight ready to drop. A conservator stands nearby with a tablet, recording measurements. They explain softly that this might be an early chiming automaton, a machine that rang bells at fixed intervals without human pulling. The idea that villagers once heard regular chimes timed by gears instead of guesswork feels oddly modern. Here's the quirky part. Carved into one wooden beam is a small face sticking out its tongue. Under magnification, you can see it's not random whittling, but a deliberate caricature, possibly of the builder himself. Someone centuries ago left a hidden selfie in the machinery. Historians still argue whether such faces were protective charms, inside jokes, or signatures in an era when few could sign names. You run your finger near it, resisting the urge to poke its nose. The conservator shows you a brass rod with teeth like a comb, part of an escapement far more sophisticated than expected. Some engineers think it might have doubled as an astronomical indicator, showing moon phases or tides. Others think that's romantic speculation. Either way, it rewrites the story of timekeeping here. You glance at your watch, imagining swapping it for a pocket-sized version of the contraption, stone weight included, your light joke number one. The tower creaks under a gust of wind. Through a high window, you can see the fjord far below, mist curling like breath. Bells hang overhead, silent now, but your imagination supplies their sound, a low, steady toll blending with the hiss of rain. The rhythm slows your pulse until you're breathing with it. You picture villagers hearing the chimes centuries ago, setting out bread, counting prayers, or just sighing at another hour gone. A wooden ladder leads up to the actual bell loft. You climb carefully. Up here the dust smells faintly sweet, like dried hay. Between beams you glimpse more carved doodles. A cat chasing a mouse, a crude sunburst, even a pair of interlock rings. Each is a tiny whisper from some bored craftsman. The conservator jokes about medieval Easter eggs and code. Second light joke, and you chuckle quietly. In the center of the loft sits a small wooden chest recently pried open. Inside lay bits of parchment covered in numbers and stars. Some think it's a set of maintenance notes. Others see an early attempt at predictive calendrics. Historians still argue whether the tower's builder was simply a skilled carpenter or a wandering savant mixing astronomy and mechanics. The ambiguity hangs in the dusty air like another bell waiting to ring. You step to the window and look out. The rain has eased. A pale sun breaks through, striking the fjord and making it glitter. The ghost ship rests beneath those waters. Gears rest above, time layered on time. You exhale slowly, leaning into the frame, feeling the tower's gentle sway. It's almost like being on a ship again, your third soft joke as you imagine seasick monks running up to wind the clock. As you descend the stairs, the chimes of your footsteps echo like a countdown. At the base, a narrow corridor leads toward a district once infamous for plague pits and, oddly enough, perfume jars, a place where fear and fragrance mingled. You follow that scent in your mind, letting the slow tick of the tower fade into a hush. Your shoes scuff along slick cobblestones as you leave the bell tower's shadow and drift into a cramped medieval lane. The air thickens here, warm bread from a nearby oven mixing with something more medicinal, almost floral. Archaeologists call this quarter the apothecary strip, but until a few summers ago nobody knew what lay beneath. Then a road repair sliced through the stones and exposed a pit of jumbled bones, small glass vials, and fragments of wax seals. At first, everyone assumed another anonymous burial ground, but lab tests rewrote the story in a way that now tingles your nose. You step over a rope cordon and kneel beside an open trench. Within the soil, pale femurs glow like driftwood. Next to them sits a cluster of delicate jars, tiny as thumbs, some intact with crumbly residues inside. A conservator hands you a sealed bag of powder taken from one jar. Even through the plastic, you catch a whiff of lavender and resin. Mainstream history says ordinary people in this city had little access to exotic scents during the Black Death. Yet these vials contain frankincense from the Levant, rose oil from far-off Damascus, and even crushed ambergris. Someone here tried to fight the plague with perfume. It's a curious fact that medieval physicians believed foul smells bred disease and pleasant aromas blocked it. Perfumed masks, pomanders, and burning herbs were as common as today's hand sanitizer. But these jars suggest an entire underground operation, possibly a merchant family blending and distributing protective scents for neighbors. Among the bones are not just adults, but children and animals. Did the makers die testing their own remedies? Historians still argue whether this pit is a mass grave of victims or an accidental chemical dump from a failed experiment. The debate hovers like the faint scent above the trench. A student volunteer shows you a fragment of parchment pulled from the edge of the pit. Faded ink spells out a half-legible recipe. Rose, rosemary, vinegar, and then a smudge. It looks like a medieval forerunner of a modern essential oil blend. You joke under your breath that someone basically invented artisanal plague diffusers. Light joke one, and the student giggles nervously. Further down the lane, you enter a low building once used as a spice warehouse. The walls still exude a faint cinnamon note. Ground-penetrating radar revealed multiple layers of shelving below, and in a hidden cellar researchers found dozens of clay ampoules labeled with symbols rather than words. A crescent moon, a starburst, a tiny skull. Some scholars believe these were early branding marks. Others suspect coded warnings about potency. Either way, the jars tell a neighborhood where fear met ingenuity. In a corner sits a display of sweet bags, little cloth pouches stuffed with herbs, discovered clutched in skeletal hands. They're embroidered with threads so fine you can see each twist under glass. One shows a crude heart pierced by an arrow, another a sprig of sage. You imagine someone sewing these while rumors of pestilence roll through the street. Your second gentle joke arrives as you picture a medieval Etsy shop. Hand-stitched plague pouches, now with extra time. But your smile fades at the thought of desperation behind the craft. The conservator invites you to touch a replica jar. It's warm from the sun, smooth as a pebble. You bring it to your nose. A faint ghost of clove lingers. Modern chemists extracted DNA from the residues and found traces of plants now rare in this region, suggesting trade routes stayed open longer than assumed. That pushes back the timeline of when the city supposedly sealed itself off. Once again, your mental map of the past shifts. Stepping back into daylight, you notice how the lane narrows and twists. Rainwater trickles between stones, carrying scents from the trench toward a covered arcade. You follow, half expecting a sneeze. Instead, you find a painted mural newly revealed under peeling plaster. A procession of masked figures holding sprigs to their noses. Some masks are bird-beaked, others like snouts. Historians still argue whether these images depict actual doctors, carnival performers, or a symbolic dance of death. The ambiguity feels like incense smoke curling and dispersing before you can name it. As you walk, a breeze rises, and for a moment the mingled smells of bread, herbs, and damp stones seem to wrap around you like a blanket. You think of how sensory life in the Middle Ages was far richer and stranger than textbook timelines. You picture the bell tower gears ticking away above, marking hours of coughing neighbors below. The scene is both sad and oddly comforting. People reaching for whatever beauty they could, even while terrified. At the lanes and a heavy wooden door leads into a castle armory, where another puzzle waits. Behind it sits a suit of armor famous in paintings, but newly proven not to belong to the knight everyone thought. You reach for the iron handle, feeling a faint tingle of anticipation, as if the scent of clove and rose still lingers on your fingers. The armory's door groans open on leather hinges, and a wave of cool air washes over you like a sigh. Inside, rows of helmets glint under dim lantern light, their visors blank and unblinking. You step across rust-strewn floors, each crunch a small drumbeat in the hush. At the far end stands the celebrity of this collection, a full suit of late medieval plate armor, mounted on a wooden dummy, hands clasped around a ceremonial sword. For decades, tour guides have said this was Sir Edric's battle gear, the knight whose name shows up in ballads about a heroic last stand. But a few winters ago, a new metallurgical test cracked a legend like an eggshell. You move closer, fingertips grazing the edge of a pauldron. Mainstream history placed the armor in the 1450s, but analysis of the iron's isotopes shows it was forged at least 30 years later, in a region 200 miles away. The decorative etching, tiny vines curling along the breastplate, matches a workshop known for tournament armor, not battlefield gear. Suddenly, the famous story of Sir Edric fighting to the death in this suit looks shaky. Historians still argue whether the ballad described a real person at all or a composite hero, wearing whatever armor the singer imagined. What's quirky here is how the suit itself tells a different story. When conservators removed the gauntlets, they found a hidden compartment in one cuff containing a scrap of parchment with a doodle of a grinning pig and a recipe for spiced ale. Some think it's just a smith's lunch note. Others suspect a mocking talisman slipped in by an apprentice. You joke softly that even knights needed snack reminders. Light joke one, and the echo sounds like a chuckle. A docent shows you fresh 3D scans of the dents along the left breastplate. They're not spear impacts, as tour plaques once claimed, but deliberate test strikes from a smith's hammer. This armor may never have seen combat at all. Instead, it was a misfit piece, too heavy for just, too ornate for war, possibly a diplomatic gift rejected by its recipient. In other words, a medieval closet queen, your second gentle joke, standing here for centuries pretending to be a veteran. You walk around the dummy and notice how narrow the waist is, how short the arms. Whoever it was built for had a very different physique than the tall, broad-shouldered knight in paintings. New scholarship proposes it belonged to a teenage prince training for ceremonial parades. Others think it was for a woman of high rank who practiced martial display. The possibility unsettles long-held assumptions. You imagine a hidden figure, young or female, marching in glittering steel while crowds cheer for Sir Edric, never knowing the truth. On a nearby table lies a set of mail links removed from under plates. They're joined in an unusual 5, in one pattern rare outside Italy. This hints at a cross-regional team of craftsmen blending styles. One historian quips it's like the medieval IKEA armor, assembled from imported parts. You grin at that image. Third soft joke, as you picture flat-pack lances and Allen keys tucked under a visor. Sunlight filters through an arrow slit and lands on the armor's visor, making it glow like an empty face. For a moment you hear faint clanging, ghostly echoes of the forge, or just your heartbeat slowing. You think about how objects can outlive their myths, waiting for someone with patience and better tools to read them honestly. The docent gestures to a side door leading into the cathedral's undercroft. Beneath those stones runs a secret tunnel newly mapped by archaeologists. Some say it was a smuggling route, others a refuge, still others a ritual path between sacred and secular spaces. The debate hums like a muted drum. You take one last look at the misfit armor, its etched vines curling like question marks, and then step toward the stairwell that drops into damp darkness. You descend a narrow flight of stone steps, the air cooling with each spiral until your breath fogs faintly before you. The walls are slick with condensation, and a thin trickle of water runs down the center groove, echoing like a far-off metronome. This is the cathedral's undercroft, where a newly discovered tunnel stretches into darkness. It had been walled off for centuries. Official records never mention it, until the ground subsidence open a hole big enough for a person to crawl through. Now a rope light snakes along the floor, casting a soft glow like moonlight trapped underground. As you follow the path, the smell of incense clings to the stone as though hundreds of processions still march here. Mainstream history describes cathedrals as above-ground spaces of worship, but this passage hints at an unseen layer. The tunnel leads from the main altar to a forgotten side chapel, and then farther still under the old merchant quarter. Some archaeologists think clergy smuggled relics or people. Others think it was a penitential route for secret rituals. Historians still argue whether the tunnel's primary function was practical or mystical, and no one can prove either story yet. Your hand brushes carved marks on the wall, interlocking circles and rough arrows. They're not in any known script but seem purposeful. The quirky tidbit is that one section bears a crude carving of a donkey wearing a bishop's mitre, complete with staff. Was it satire, secret code, or just a bored stonemason's doodle? You whisper your first light joke about medieval underground memes, and your voice bounces back in surprisingly warm echo. The floor dips and rises like the deck of a slow ship. In some stretches, brick vaulting gives way to living rock, where stalactites drip mineral beads. Archaeologists found traces of beeswax along the ledges, suggesting candlelit ceremonies. They also discovered fragments of a wooden ladder coated in gold leaf, perhaps part of a reliquary procession. The air feels charged, as if you're walking through the exhale of centuries. Halfway down, you come to a widened chamber. It's circular, with a domed ceiling painted in faint stars. Modern imaging revealed a hidden fresco behind limewash. Figures in white robes carrying small chests. One scholar sees smugglers ferrying relics. Another imagines initiates of a lost order practicing underground worship. The fresco's central motif, a river of light pouring from a chalice, feeds more speculation. You imagine medieval drama like a Netflix series. Season 1, The Secret Tunnel Society. Second, Gentle Joke, and it makes you smile in the dimness. A narrow slot in the wall admits a single shaft of daylight from somewhere above. Dust motes float in it like lazy comets. You pause, letting your eyes adjust, and picture merchants above haggling over spices while beneath their feet robed figures shuffle in silence. The contrast feels like a heartbeat between worlds. In the deepest section, the tunnel forks. One arm leads to a bricked-up doorway marked with an X. The other slopes down toward a stone basin filled with stagnant water. Conservators sampled it and found a mix of ash, wine residue, and medicinal herbs. Perhaps a ritual wash or a clandestine baptism. The smell is earthy but oddly sweet. You lean closer and catch a whiff of rosemary, echoing the perfumed jars you left behind. Time folds over itself like damp linen. At last, the passage ends at a stairwell climbing sharply upward. The walls here are smoother, lined with niches once holding candles. As you climb, you think about how many lives pass through the secret artery. Priests, merchants, refugees, each convinced of its meaning. The scholars still debating above are only the latest footsteps in that echo. Your second light joke bubbles up as you imagine medieval commuters complaining about tunnel delays. Next relic train arrives in 2 hours, and your laugh sounds soft, almost respectful. The climb ends at a heavy oak trapdoor. You push, and it opens with a sigh into blinding white light. You emerge onto a mountain pass, wind snapping at your cloak. In front of you lies a field of ice that until recently had a perfectly preserved medieval feast, tables, platters, and all. Meltwater glints like silver between stones. You take a deep breath of the alpine air, bracing yourself for yet another mystery thawing out before your eyes. Cold air stings your cheeks as you step fully onto the pass. The sky above is a pale, unblinking blue, and the snow underfoot squeaks like dry sand. All around you are peaks jagged as broken teeth, but right here in a shallow bowl, lies a miracle of timing. A medieval feast flash frozen by an avalanche and only uncovered last spring. You move closer, boots crunching over melting ice, and see long wooden tables emerging like whales breaching. Planks still lashed together, pewter plates still lined up in rows, jugs toppled mid-pour. It feels as if everyone simply stepped away for a moment. Mainstream history assumed caravans moving through this pass carried only basic rations. Yet here are roasted game bones, honey cakes hardened like amber, and bright glass beads that once decorated napkins. Carbon dating places the event in the late 1300s, exactly when trade between northern towns and Italian fairs supposedly collapsed. The discovery suggests high-altitude banquets for diplomats or merchants continued longer than believed, challenging the neat timeline of medieval decline. You lean over a platter of what looks like dried fruit. It's actually a string of figs, their skins wrinkled but still fragrant. A conservator nearby tells you chemists detected saffron and cinnamon in the glaze. Spices more expensive than gold per ounce at the time. This is a quirky tidbit. Someone hauled luxury food up a dangerous pass for a meal under the sky. Historians still argue whether it was a wedding feast, a peace negotiation, or an initiation rite of a merchant guild. Each theory brings a different image. Vows whispered in thin air, treaties sealed over mulled wine, or traders pledging loyalty with shared bread. You kneel beside a toppled jug. Inside the frozen slush glints deep red, wine or perhaps medicinal cordial. Your first light joke slips out as you imagine a medieval sommelier complaining about notes of glacier in the vintage, and your breath fogs like a soft laugh. Around the tables are clues to catastrophe. A collapsed awning pole, a broken horn, hoofprint of pack animals that then vanish under deeper ice. Did a sudden storm scatter the guests? Was there an avalanche or an ambush? No bones of humans have yet been found. Only the meal and belongings. So perhaps everyone escaped but left their treasures behind. Or perhaps bodies lie deeper still, waiting for the next thaw. The uncertainty gives the sight a hush like a held breath. A little farther downslope stands a cluster of small chests sealed with wax. Inside are bolts of cloth dyed in brilliant blues and greens, colors thought too delicate for such travel. One cloth bears a stitched emblem of twin mountains under a star. Scholars think it may mark a forgotten trade league. Others insist it's simply a decorative motif with no grand meaning. The debate plays out in conferences while the ice keeps its secrets. You notice a wooden spoon carved with a smiling moon face, another with a crude fish, each utensil different, as if guests brought their own. Your second gentle joke bubbles up, a medieval potluck on a mountaintop. Bring your own spoon, saffron optional, and the wind steals your chuckle. At the feast's edge, a wooden harp lies half encased in ice, strings snap but shape intact. Acoustic engineers are already scanning it to reconstruct the melodies played during the banquet. The idea of music drifting between peaks while snow clouds gather give you a shiver of awe. You remember the singing stones back in the lowland chapel, and wonder if sound itself is a thread stitching these mysteries. The sun climbs higher, dazzling off snow. Meltwater trickles under the tables, carrying fragments of bread crust toward a crevasse. You crouch and cup some in your hand. It's icy but sweet. You think about how many lives converged here. Cooks, porters, musicians, all united for one fleeting meal. The ice preserved their preparation, but not their laughter. At the far end of the site, a narrow trail winds toward a stone chapel built into the cliff. Local legend called it the Echo Shrine for the way its pillars sang in wind. Scientists have just begun acoustic tests there and discovered hidden harmonics built into the masonry. Some call it a deliberate act of sonic architecture. Others think it's a happy accident in geology. The debate hums in your ears like a low chord as you set off toward that sound, leaving behind the thawing feast. You follow the narrow trail carved into the cliff, one hand brushing cold stone, while the other shields your eyes from glare. Below, the remnants of the frozen feast glint like a mirage. Ahead, a dark opening swallows the wind. This is a chapel locals call the Echo Shrine, and as you step inside, the temperature drops and the sound of your own footsteps stretches and bends. It's like walking into the throat of an instrument. The interior is small, no grand nave, just a single rectangular hall lined with 6 pillars. But each pillar is veined with a different kind of stone, limestone granite, a red marble shot with white streaks. Mainstream history dismissed the mix as haphazard building with whatever materials were available. Yet new acoustic tests show the pillars resonate at complementary frequencies. When you hum softly, a pillar hums back at a lower pitch, as though a giant tuning fork lives inside. Engineers mapped the room and found nodes where sound waves amplify prayers into a warm halo. It's the first documented case here of intentional sound shaping in medieval architecture. You run your palm over one pillar. It's cool and slightly gritty. A conservator explains that micro-scratches align in spiral patterns, possibly a template for shaping vibrations. The quirky tidbit is a small carving near the base, a fox playing a harp. It's been hidden under grime for centuries, and now that it's cleaned, you can see the strings etched one by one. Was it the mason's mascot, a riddle for visitors, or a subtle signature? Historians still argue whether the entire harmonic design was deliberate sacred science or simply coincidental craft plus lively imagination. You step to the center of the room where a circle of stones marks the sweet spot. A faint breeze seeps through cracks, carrying scents of alpine herbs. You take a breath and hum again, this time a lower note. The pillars respond with a soft chord, and your voice feels bigger than your body. Your first gentle joke pops out. Guess the monks built the first medieval karaoke bar, and your echo bounces back like a chuckle from long ago. Light filters through a high-slit window, scattering across the walls in shifting stripes. The fresco here shows robed figures holding not candles but tuning forks, an image scholars once dismissed as stylized staffs. Now they're reconsidering. Maybe ritual involved not only sight and smell, but sound frequencies designed to alter states of mind. You picture a congregation swaying to tones, breathing in incense, feeling their bones vibrate. Your second soft joke arrives as you imagine a medieval wellness retreat, sound bath, 30 groats procession, and you grin quietly. In the apse stand a small altar carved with waves and stars. Beneath it, archaeologists found a hollow cavity containing shards of glass tinted cobalt and emerald. When assembled, they form pieces of a device like a primitive prism or lens. Some believe it was used to bend light into sound ritual. Others think it's unrelated debris. The debate lingers, shimmering like the light itself. You sit on a worn bench along the wall. The stone is cold but somehow comforting. You close your eyes and listen. The pillars seem to breathe, each a different note. The harmonics settle your pulse until your thoughts slow. It's easy to see why people once believed such spaces open a doorway between earth and heaven. You imagine pilgrims trudging up the same trail you just walked, hearts pounding from altitude and anticipation, then entering and feeling this wash of resonant calm. On the floor near your feet lies a fallen fragment of carving, half a fox's tail, chipped clean off. You pick it up, feeling its weight. The conservator says more fox motifs appear in hidden corners, almost like a secret mascot of the builders. Some suspect the fox was a metaphor for cunning or transformation. Others think it's simply local folklore sneaking into sacred stone. You roll it in your palm and place it back gently. A side door opens onto a ledge where wind rushes past. From here you can see far down the valley toward a town whose cathedral hold a reliquary said contain a queen's heart. But documents show conflicting routes and dates. New evidence suggests that heart traveled far from official records. You stand in the wind, harmonics still humming in your ears, and set off toward that next mystery beating faintly in history's chest. You descend from the echoing chapel into a gentler valley where the wind smells of damp moss and chimney smoke. A cobble road leads to a small stone church, plain on the outside but famous for one thing: a reliquary said to hold the heart of Queen Isolde, a monarch whose romantic legend saturates local ballads. Inside, candles flicker against glass cases filled with jewel boxes. For centuries, pilgrims have come to gaze at the largest of these boxes, believing a fragment of royal devotion beats within. But fresh forensic work has cracked that certainty wide open. You approach the reliquary, gold filigree, sapphires, and a lock shaped like a tiny crown. Its inscription reads, Silvar Regni Nostrae, Heart of our Queen. Yet mainstream history now has a twist. 2 years ago, researchers took microsamples from the dried contents. DNA analysis showed the tissue belonged not to Queen Isolde at all, but to a young nobleman from a distant region. Records show a courier traveling here around the time of the Queen's death, but no explanation of why. Historians still argue whether her true heart lies elsewhere, whether it was stolen, or whether she orchestrated a secret burial herself. The quirky part is how the reliquary contains, tucked behind a tissue, a folded scrap of silk embroidered with a fox and harp, the same motifs from the echoing chapel. No one noticed it until the latest cleaning. Some think it's a relic of her personal emblem. Others think it signals a covert network of masons and courtiers moving artifacts like chess pieces. You joke softly that medieval Europe basically had its own postal mystery series, fox and harp delivery, and the candle flames seem to flicker with amusement. On a nearby wall hangs a faded map of pilgrimage routes. A conservator points out faint dotted lines where official paths end but ghost routes continue, hinting at clandestine transfers of relics. You imagine a royal heart traveling incognito across mountains, passed from hand to hand like a smuggled letter. Your second gentle joke surfaces. Priority shipping, one heart, handle with care, and the echo of your whisper sounds like a sigh from the reliquary itself. In the apps, a hidden niche recently opened during renovations reveals another box. Plain oak, no jewels. Inside lies a parchment with a rough sketch of a ship and coordinates matching a coastal abbey hundreds of miles away. That abbey's archives list a sealed chest delivered the same year the Queen died. Was her heart divided? Sent to multiple shrines? Was it swapped for a decoy? Scholars debate in circles, while tour guides still tell the old romantic story. You step outside into a small graveyard. Mossy stones lean at odd angles, some carved with foxtails, some with simple crosses. A robin hops from marker to marker. The air feels thicker, as if carrying secrets. You think of Queen Isolde's final procession, and how much of it might have been pageant, how much cloak and dagger, the heart as symbol, as relic, as contraband. The myths comfort pilgrims even as the facts shift beneath them. Beyond the graveyard, a footpath leads to a library where an obscure cartographer drew a map with uncanny accuracy centuries before explorers officially charted certain coasts. Scholars are only now deciphering his marginal notes, which could upend the timeline of discovery. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the foxheart motif like a breadcrumb trail guiding you forward. The path winds down to a windswept coastline where gulls wheel over black rocks and the sea mumbles old stories beneath the foam. Ahead stands a squat, slate-roof priory built like a fortress against storms. Local legend calls it the tide-locked abbey, because at high water its entrance disappears under waves. You cross the slick stones at low tide, feeling barnacles crunch underfoot. Inside, salt damp coats the walls. An echo of chanting hangs in the nave, though no monks have lived here for 500 years. The mainstream fact here is clear enough. This abbey was a hub for copying nautical charts. Surviving manuscripts show remarkably precise outlines of distant shores centuries before official voyages. The fringe tidbit is that some charts contain faint, almost invisible sketches of sea beasts, half fish, half machine, that resemble nothing in known mythologies. Historians still argue whether these doodles were playful embellishments, coded signals for hidden harbors, or memories of actual sightings by merchant captains who ventured far off approved routes. You run your fingers over a cracked fresco where two figures in cloaks hand a small casket from one ship to another under moonlight. A marginal note nearby reads, "So are Reg," which could mean Royal Heart or Crown Registry. Your first sleepy joke escapes. Medieval DHL really had some wild package labels, and your breath fogs in the chilly nave like a ghost chuckle. Down a spiral stair, you find a scriptoria vault, lined with pigeonholes of roll vellum. One tube marked with a fox and harp contains a shipping log from 1299 listing item, core ET map. The handwriting trembles, suggesting secrecy or haste. Did Queen Isolde's heart arrive here? Was it bartered for a map? Scholars puzzle over smudged ink as if reading a crime scene. In a side chapel, a glass window shows a monk gazing at stars with a rudimentary astrolabe. Beside it, a gloss notes tides and eclipses aligning with passages. Some modern researchers think the abbey coordinated covert departures timed to celestial events. Others scoff, claiming monks simply loved astronomy. You picture yourself standing between those viewpoints like someone at a buffet of theories, not sure which dish to try first. Out on the cloister walk, see spray lashes through empty arches. Shells crunch under your boots. You find yourself whispering your second gentle joke. Nothing says romance like smuggling a heart across tides under a lunar eclipse. Even the gulls seem to pause as though listening. At the far end, a small wooden door opens to a hidden quay, now silted up. There you glimpse rotted pilings and the curved outline of a long sunken barge. Divers recently found a lead-lined chest in the mud. Inside, wax seals stamped with a foxharp emblem and a fragment of velvet matching the reliquary cloth. No tissue remains, but a copper tag etched number 2 of 3. If true, this means at least 3 containers were made. Maybe 3 hearts, maybe 1 heart split, maybe decoys. Historians still argue whether the numbering indicates sequence or authenticity. You linger by the quay as tide rises. Water covers your boots like a creeping secret. The abbey bells, silent for centuries, emit a single low groan as metal shifts with salt air. You murmur your third joke, softer than a lullaby, either that a ghost monk or my stomach asking for midnight snacks. It blends with the surf's hiss until both sound like distant chanting. Following the Foxharp Trail, you climb a narrow stair carved in rock, emerging on a cliff path. From here you can see an island far offshore where ruins shimmer in mist. Local fishermen call it Isalda's Rest, but official charts list no name. Your mind stitches together all the symbols, the reliquary, the maps, the numbered chests. Perhaps the final answer waits out there. Or perhaps the mystery is the point, a lullaby of unanswered questions rocking you like the tide. The wind smells of kelp and candle wax. Your cloak flaps gently as you turn from the abbey, knowing the last stretch of this sleepy investigation lies ahead across misty water. A soft drizzle begins as you follow a goat track down to a moon-silvered cove. The tide is slack now, the air metallic with salt and wet stone. A creaking skiff waits, its hull painted with a fox and harp you've been chasing like a lullaby through all these centuries. You step aboard, push off, and let the current pull you toward the mist-wrapped island fishermen call Isalda's Rest. Each or stroke is a whisper. Even the gulls have fallen silent as if they, too, want the ending of this bedtime story. The island rises low and green, crowned by tumbled walls and a single leaning tower. Mainstream historians have long listed it as an abandoned lighthouse, yet the ruins hide something more. Beneath ivy and sand lie the cellars of a tiny convent established in the late 1200s to shelter items of the heart. The quirky detail. Inventories found here mention not just relics, but 3 hearts and a map written in a code blending Latin, Old Norse, and a few symbols no one has decoded. Historians still argue whether the phrase refers to actual organs, secret lovers, or a trio of sacred vows. You beach the skiff on soft pebbles and climb toward the tower. Inside, a spiral stair leads down into a circular chamber lined with candle niches. In the center stands a plain stone altar, its top engraved with a fox and harp entwined. When researchers excavated here last summer, they found a third chest, this one empty but lined with crushed herbs still fragrant after 7 centuries. Lab tests suggest myrrh, rosemary, and a pinch of ground pearl. Was this the final resting place of the Queen's real heart, now dissolved into dust? Or a decoy meant to scent the air like devotion? The debate drifts on like sea fog. Your first gentle joke escapes as you brush sand from the altar. 700 years and still smells better than my gym bag. The walls do not disagree. In a niche above you, a faded fresco shows a crowned woman handing a small object to a hooded monk. A caption in cramped script reads, Cor Liberum, heart set free. Some scholars think a hint she ordered her heart's dispersal herself, a final act of autonomy. Outside, the drizzle becomes a hush. Waves slap softly against rock like a heartbeat. You picture the Queen's heart, whether one or many, carried over mountains, hidden in reliquaries, ferried under eclipses, finally brought here to mingle with herbs and sea air. Your second gentle joke rises. Longest treasure hunt ever. And the prize is aromatherapy? It floats up to the tower's empty window. Near the altar, a trapdoor reveals a small crypt. On the floor lies a stone carved with 3 interlocked foxtails and a harp string snapped in the middle. Beneath it, archaeologists uncovered a parchment too fragile to move. A digital scan shows lines of music, not text, a lullaby in medieval notation. Some musicologists believe it's a funeral hymn. Others suspect it encodes coordinates of yet another site. The mystery, like the melody, lingers unresolved. You sit on the cool stone, listening to the surf below. All the earlier scenes, the echoing chapel, the labyrinth, the reliquary, the tide-locked abbey, thread together like beads on a drowsy string. Your third gentle joke is a whisper. If Netflix doesn't option this as medieval package tracker, they're missing out. Even the stones seem to smile. Slowly you realize the island itself is shaped like a heart when seen from above. Modern drones have confirmed it. Whether coincidence or careful landscaping, no one knows. Historians still argue whether the shape inspired the legends or the legends inspired the shape. You draw your cloak tighter, feel the damp warmth of mystery settling around you like a blanket, and let your breathing match the ocean's rhythm. The drizzle softens into mist, the mist into a velvet hush. Words slow, stretch, and drift like sails slackening after a long voyage. The tower's shadow lengthens, folds over you, and feels almost like a hand smoothing your brow. Each unanswered question becomes less a riddle than a lull, an invitation to drift. In this gentle twilight of history and sea, you sense that some mysteries are not puzzles to solve, but songs to hum while falling asleep. The fox and harp, the hearts and maps, the tides and bells, they merge into a single quiet chord, resonating low and steady. You let that chord carry you outward, like a boat rocking on calm water. Each sways softer than the last. Soon only the hush of waves remains, and with it the promise that stories, like tides, will always return, bringing fresh secrets to whisper as you rest.